wired with an inability to turn off at the end of the day? Are you wired and tired, where you power through but feel unmotivated? Or are you just tired with a strong sense of overwhelm and exhaustion? If you said yes to one of those, you may have adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout. In this episode of the Renewed Mama podcast, we are renewing our health by learning more about supporting our adrenals. My guest is Kristen Files, a nutritional therapy practitioner and master restorative wellness practitioner. She is the owner of Forest Creek Wellness, a boutique functional nutrition practice in Austin, Texas. She is also a homeschool mom to 4. For Kristen, food is her love language, and she loves helping exhausted and overwhelmed busy moms use food to nourish their bodies and their family. Real food is medicine. Kristen is going to help us understand our adrenals and how we can support them. You are listening to the Renewed Mama podcast. I'm Kimberly Mutar, and I help mamas like you stay renewed. Renewed in your thoughts that are on repeat while you wash dishes or scrub the toilets. Renewed in the words you say to yourself and to your children when it's the best day ever and when it spirals into chaos and temper tantrums. Renewed in how you respond so that you keep showing up as the mama you want to be. But wait, mama, there is more of us to renew than just our thoughts, words, and responses. We are whole people. In order to renew full body, all of us as moms, every part, we are taking the next few weeks to focus specifically on our health and our home environment. We're talking about nutrition, sugar cravings, balancing hormones, exercising, supporting our thyroid, pelvic floor health, detoxing our homes, gut health, picky eaters, and more. I hope you stay tuned for all of these special episodes. Did you know that the Renewed Mama podcast is on YouTube and Rumble? If you like to watch video podcasts while you wash dishes or fold laundry, join me there. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment to help the YouTube and Rumble channels to grow so that more mamas find the podcast and stay renewed with us. Thank you. Welcome, Kristen, to the Renewed Mama podcast. I am so happy to be having this conversation with you because I know that talking about our adrenals and supporting our adrenals is going to be helpful to so many mamas.
I agree. Thank you so much for having me. I just love working with mothers because I remember being a young mother and having a hard time. So this is near and dear to my heart.
Yes. Well, I understand that you have walked through adrenal fatigue, and I've heard you say before that you were born exhausted. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was just basically born tired. Since I can ever remember, I was just a tired child. I had health issues. I was seeing a GI doctor at 6 months old, and that just kind of escalated. And I remember when I would get ready for elementary school, my father would wake me up and I would take a nap, brush my teeth, take a nap, eat my breakfast, take a nap, pack my bag, take a nap, and then sleep all the way to school. Many times in school, I did not test very well because I would fall asleep during tests, or I just wouldn't understand or remember the instructions given to me for certain assignments. I would lose things very often. Kind of a problem child in a way, if you think about it, but I had very patient parents. And then that followed me through my teen years as well. I was just constantly tired to really invest in friendships and form a lot of friendships. I was just like, even as a mother, I was so exhausted. I remember going to the grocery store with my children, and I would have to take a 3-hour nap because the trip to the grocery store was so exhausting to me. And I feel like I missed a lot of my kids' childhood because of that, because I spent a lot of time in bed. I had to teach my oldest daughter how to take care of my newborn son because I just couldn't get out of bed in the morning. So a lot of issues and struggling with chronic fatigue.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it was kind of frustrating because you would go to a doctor, conventional medicine or maybe even like counseling, and they would sort of minimize it and say, "Oh, motherhood it's tiring. It's just because you're a mom. I had, 4 kids. Just because you have 4 kids, that's a lot of work." Which I agree, it is a lot of work, but at the same time, I don't think that that is normal, right?
Right.
So I had a lot of additional issues. Come to find out later, there were issues with thyroid and blood sugar, and I had gestational diabetes. So there's a big red flag there, and we can kind of talk about that a little bit later on. But not being able to think clearly, not having good thoughts. And so again, you would go to the doctor and they would say, "Oh, that's depression. So we're just going to put you on an antidepressant." And that didn't really make a whole lot of difference in my quality of life or my energy levels either. Lots of gut issues. I also had a condition called interstitial cystitis, where I had chronic urinary tract infections. And then the solution for those urinary tract infections was to get on antibiotics. So I'd be on antibiotics, 12 to 20 times per year. And so come to find out that's related more to inflammation rather than actual bacteria. But yeah, so lots of issues. I call it an alphabet soup of diagnoses.
Oh, wow. Well, Kristen, I am so thankful that you're on the other side of that health journey. I'm
Me
sure you
too.
must be too.
Yes.
Let's talk about our adrenal glands. What role do they play in our bodies, and what is adrenal fatigue?
Yeah, so the adrenal glands govern mostly your stress response and your fight or flight response. That is what they're most well known for. But they take care of a whole lot of other things too. So over 50 hormones that we know of that have to do with reproduction, with metabolism, with blood pressure, with immune function. And that's just what we know of, right? They're still learning more. They're 2 tiny little glands that sit atop your kidneys. So you can remember them because kidneys are the renals and this is the adrenals. So just above the kidneys. And they do interact with the kidneys a lot to help regulate your blood sugar and your mineral balance. They are also primary in metabolism. So regulating your blood sugar and your inflammation response. Also a little bit of gut health. They also help with your sex hormones, so estrogen and testosterone and DHEA, which is a precursor hormone. And then, like I said, that fight or flight response, which they're most well known for. And so you asked, what is adrenal fatigue? And adrenal fatigue is where a miscommunication between the organs of this adrenal function begin to break down and miscommunicate. So you have your hypothalamus and your pituitary, which are little glands in the brain, and they communicate with the adrenal glands, and that communication can break down. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit later, just like how they can begin to dysregulate. But medical community doesn't really recognize adrenal fatigue because they say, "Oh, the adrenal glands don't get tired. They can still produce the hormones they need to produce. They're just not doing so." So they kind of laugh at that term or that diagnosis. But I like the term adrenal fatigue because it's the adrenals, and fatigue is a major symptom of dysregulation or breakdown of the communication. So doctors may recognize hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, HPA axis dysregulation is the medical term for it.
Wow. That was a great explanation. Thank you for that.
Yeah. It's kind of a high level overview. It's certainly more intricate, but in layperson's terms, that's what's going on.
Right. And what are some of the symptoms that we experience when we have the dysregulated adrenals or the adrenal fatigue?
Yes, so the symptoms, because the adrenals communicate with so many systems in the
Mhm.
body, they can be broad and varied. And so that's why it's hard sometimes to figure out what is going on. But the hallmark symptom really is exhaustion and overwhelm. And it may not even be overt exhaustion like I experienced, but you could be someone who still functions and you feel super tired underneath or inside, or like life is just really hard,
Mm.
or you just don't feel the motivation that you used to feel. All of those things are the big main symptoms. Other things that can happen, and just understand, like, no one person will have all of these. You could have some
Right.
of them and it would still be the same issue at the heart of it. But you could experience vision issues. A big one is light intolerance. So if you think of like when you go out into the sun and you like squint, you cannot function without your sunglasses. That's a really big one. Pain, like all over, chronic pain, alignment issues. So if you've had chiropractic care and they tell you that you have a short leg and it just stays a short leg despite your continued care, or even inability to hold those chiropractic adjustments.
Um,
Brain fog, so like, in like you just won't have great brain function. So brain fog or lack of clarity, or I would call it, like, I felt like a half of a person, fuzzy thinking, memory issues. Weight gain. So I know weight gain, it has to do with so many things, but the thing is the spare tire or the muffin top around the middle and just doesn't go away despite everything that you've tried, all the diets, cravings, especially for salt and sugar, immune issues. So being, sick over and over and over all the time, or increased allergies or food sensitivities. And then a big one is reproductive dysfunction. So that's, becoming more and more common today. You see women experience increased miscarriages or infertility, things like that can all be related to adrenal function, and then impaired sexual function. So low libido, or those sorts of things. Mhm.
right. Wow, that's just a big long list. I mean,
Yeah,
who knew that our adrenals controlled so much, right?
right.
Yes, yes. Well, you have a great way of describing the symptoms of adrenal fatigue as wired and tired, or just tired. I would love for you to explain this to us.
Yeah, so I think before we kind of get into the patterns, it sort of makes sense to talk about how maybe the adrenals should function when they're functioning properly.
Yeah, let's.
And so what happens is, if you have a stressor in your life, then your adrenals will fire either cortisol or adrenaline, depending on the severity of whatever stress is going on. And that would be considered like being in an alarm phase. And if that continues to happen, then you might be in a situation that's a resistance phase. And so the way I kind of think of resistance is like, if you need a break from your kids and you go in your room and you shut the door and you're like, hey, kids, I'm going to take a break, just
Right.
10 minutes. And they come knocking on the door. You're like, oh my gosh, what do you need? Right. And it's nothing. And then they knock on the door. Oh my gosh, what do you need? And it's nothing. And then by the 10th time, you're just ignoring that signal. Right. And so if we get in a place where we're chronically stressed and we're chronically setting off this response, then we're not receiving the signal for adrenaline or cortisol or whatever is firing. And then if that continues, then you have a breakdown in the communication, and that would be exhaustion. So I
Okay.
think that's an important concept to really understand before you get into the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that's really important to understand is that you have a pattern throughout your day. And so a normal adrenal cortisol rhythm would be, when you wake up, your cortisol ends up being really high. After 30 minutes after you wake up, that's the highest point of the day. And then throughout the day, that high will just slowly taper off, and at your lowest point in the evening. And so that's normal function. You should be able to go to sleep, easily. It shouldn't be a struggle, that sort of a thing. So when we begin to see this communication breakdown, that's where we start to see these stages begin. And another thing to understand with the stages is they aren't always linear. So like, even though I explain them as a linear progression, you can jump to certain stages, or you can start, exhausted and go back. So that's another thing, like in the medical community, where they just don't really understand it because there's not this linear progression. It changes as you have periods of rest and restoration, or maybe followed by more stress. But the first pattern that I see really is the wired. And so this is like you're in high alert all the time. And so that's a person who's like just always on the go. They always have to be doing something. And then they might have these bouts of like, oh, I get sick and I need to take a couple weeks off, because they're not giving their body rest. So your body will make you rest if you don't do that.
Right.
Followed by, okay, let's get go. And then really relying on coffee to stimulate them and get them going. And then other stimulants to focus. So maybe, black tea throughout the day, or, reaching for sugar throughout the day. Or I will notice addiction to certain situations. So like constantly multitasking, or starting drama in their life to just like kind of keep them on edge and high alert, because this is what keeps them going. And so in this pattern, you still kind of maintain that you have energy in the morning and it's tapering out through the day, but the dysfunction will happen when you start seeing insomnia. So you're not really turning off as well at night, or you have restlessness or ADHD symptoms. You start to experience the weight gain, or maybe heart palpitations or panic attacks. And this person has a really hard time calming down. So I kind of gave them little mom phrases for each area. And so this person is my rosé all day mom, right? And so they need that glass of wine or their rosé in the evening to help them calm down, because they have this chronic over output of cortisol and stress hormones. Yeah, so that's stage number 1.
Okay.
And then stage number 2 would be where you get into this wired and tired function that you mentioned. And so this person is still experiencing chronic stress, but they're starting to experience the miscommunication. And so you'll start to see a little bit of lagging in the morning, because that response isn't so high. The recovery isn't really there, right? And so you might get a full night's rest, but you just really have a hard time waking up in the morning. Or you could see a dysregulated pattern where you're low in the morning and you're higher in the evening, so that insomnia really starts to kick in. And at night, you just can't relax because you're thinking about your to-do list and all the things that you have to do the next day. And oh my gosh, did I forget something? And this person is really muscling it through their day. So they are relying on willpower, and they might experience like a crash after they have lunch, right? And they have to take a nap, or they have to have more coffee or sugar. They get this second wind in the evening. And a term that I heard that I really like is they're vertically ill. So they feel sick, but to everyone else, they look normal because they are still functioning, right? And so you see them doing all the things that need to be done. You think they're fine, but inside they're super struggling. This person can be prone to depression, thyroid issues. You start to see procrastination a lot. I used to do this all the time. I still do sometimes, where I'll wait till the last minute to do something because I need that stress in order to be able to get a project done. And so we feel really bad about being procrastinators, but it's actually like a biophysical mechanism going on.
Wow.
You'll start to see blood sugar dysregulation, low blood pressure, and again, just poor concentration, not really able to focus. And so my little phrase for this person is "but first coffee." I even have a shirt of that, but first coffee, right? So I need my coffee to be able to get going. Yeah. And then progressing into that third stage is where you just start to see total breakdown of this communication between the brain, between the adrenals, the chronic stress response, and then their overall low cortisol. And so just constantly exhausted, can't keep up. They can't sleep, or if they do sleep, like it won't replenish them, constantly sick, not even being able to do daily tasks. I remember like it was exhausting to brush my teeth. I was just like, I go to bed, I can't brush my teeth. Or I remember my mom saying, I have to get up my energy so I can take a shower. And these are like not normal things. They might be common, but they're not normal, right? So you're not really caring for yourself. You're not able to really get out and go places. It just seems overwhelming to interact with other people. So you start to become more and more introverted. You might start accumulating different diagnoses, autoimmune issues, gut disorders, brain things. And you have chronic inflammation, just kind of apathetic, disinterested in life, extra sensitive, like your husband or your kids just totally set you off all the time. And that's because just everything has broken down, right? You're not making good cortisol, you're not making good neurotransmitters, dopamine isn't there. And so my phrase for this person is, I like to party, and by party, I mean take naps. So
yes,
it's also there too. I have that pin on my bag. It's given to me by a child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are, just real quick, those are the three
Yeah.
main stages, but there's certain stages within that. So some people will break it into the 3, some people will say there's 5, some people will say there's 7. So, there's debate about that, where you land.
Right. And you call that stages. So it is kind of incremental, where you would be the wired first and then the wired and tired, or can you jump straight to like just tired?
Yeah, you can totally jump depending on the severity of stress in your life. So think about if you're a person whose body is just in maintenance mode, right? And you don't have any nutritional stores or anything like that.
Right.
And you have a death in the family. You can totally just jump to that 3rd stage, right? Because that is such an overwhelming thing to have to deal with, right? So I think that's where there's some nuance in this, in talk between that functional integrative health and like conventional health. It's not always linear. It's often linear, but it's not always linear. And then say maybe you had this death in the family and you get a lot of rest and relaxation. You have a good community network. You eat a good diet. Maybe you get enough rest and replenishment where you get to stage 1, but you never really fully recover. Right.
Okay.
So you can go back and forth. And, I personally feel like I've done that, where I've gone in and out throughout those stages in my life.
Okay. Yeah. And then you're saying, my question is, what leads to adrenal fatigue? So in that example, you're using maybe your nutrition source are already low, and then you experience that death in the family. Is the progression of adrenal fatigue or adrenals not communicating well, is that external pressures? That is the stress that's like being the overwhelmed situation? Is it even hereditary? Is it not good enough food or not enough sleep? Like, what are the attributing factors?
Yeah, so I think all of it. I mean, I think you're getting that concept well. I think all of it kind of plays into it. So Pottinger's cat studies, he demonstrated where, like, how we treat our body, we can pass that down to the next generation.
Okay.
So if you're a parent who's struggling with adrenal issues, that's the environment that you're going to be passing on to your children and to your grandchildren, right? We don't just pass on our genetics, we pass on epigenetics, which is the environment around our genes to set them up for success or failure. So I think that's an important concept to understand. So, we didn't see this happening a couple generations ago because their grandparents gave them great, epigenetics and nutrition. And then we have the situation where, our parents were maybe struggling with this and they pass that down to us. And then we have this terrible nutritional environment as well, right? And the chronic stress of just modern day life. So I think all of those things can play into it. And then when you're saying stressors, yes, those can be external. So it can be things like trauma, right? Abuse, neglect, a death in the family. Just even, it doesn't even have to be an actual death, like your perception of something as a death or something really harmful can also play into it. So like our mindset really affects this function as well. And then it can also be, keeping with external, your environment, right? If you have exposure to toxins all the time, or, you're in a situation where you're exposed to germs or whatever all the time. Those all play into it. And then internal stressors, so things like gut imbalances or constant sickness or inflammation, those are stressors to the body as well. So we think of stressors as like this primitive, like running from the lion or lifting the car off the baby. And those are true, but the body interprets these more minor stressors in the same way.
Yes. Wow. Well, I was having a conversation. I'm going to do one episode on sugar. So I was talking with a nutritionist, Rachel Murray, about sugar, and she was saying the same thing, that as we are pregnant, and if we are consuming a lot of sugar to keep our energy up, or we've got those sugar cravings, we can pass that desire for sugar even onto our babies and our children.
Yeah, she's exactly right. And then I think that would be like, if someone's listening to this episode, that would be a very important episode to tune into, because you cannot heal adrenal issues without addressing the blood sugar issues, because they're intricately tied together. So if you get in a state where you're in chronic low blood sugar, you are telling the adrenals to fire cortisol to raise the blood sugar. And so you can't heal that if you're constantly setting it off with the way that you're treating your body.
Right, right. Yes. And I was going to ask you about the gut, our gut health, and how that's related, which you alluded to that.
Yeah, and it really does. So like you can think of if you have a leaky gut situation, then you're allowing things into your body that should never be there. And that's a stressor on the body. If you have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, that again is a stressor on the body. Undergrowth of good bacteria, again, stressor on the body. Not breaking down, digesting, and assimilating your food very well is another stressor on the body. And then those things, prolonged, happening again and again, over and over without being addressed, leads to poor immunity, which is another stressor on the body, or inflammation, again, another stressor on the body. And then conversely, if you're constantly firing your adrenals and you're in this, what we call fight or flight state, so you can be in rest and digest, or you can be in fight or flight. If you're in fight or flight state all the time, then that can start to degrade the tight junctions that are in your intestines that are keeping the foods out and the pathogens out of your body and protecting you. You can see a degradation of that. And I think it's important to note too, which I didn't really explain, there's just so many aspects of this, like to talk about, right? You can be in one of two nervous system states at the same time, and that's that fight or flight, which is the sympathetic mode, or the rest and digest, which is a parasympathetic mode. And so if you think of fight or flight and you're running from a lion, you don't need to digest a hamburger, right? Like that's just, you don't need to fight an infection. You just need to get to safety, right? And so that's fight, flight, freeze. And so if you're constantly in that sympathetic, then you're not going to digest your food, right? And so that leads to this breakdown, right? And so there's so many things when we think of recovering from adrenal fatigue that need to be considered. And I think that's kind of like the missing piece when people just go online and Google adrenal fatigue to see how all those things fit together.
Right. It's all the pieces of the puzzle, right? In terms of our health. Wow.
Yeah.
Kristen, on the Renewed Mama podcast, we're always talking about paying attention to our thoughts and our words and our responses. And I like that you mentioned our mindset is key in all of this too. But I do want to make sure that I acknowledge something here, because we can be super intentional to have a strong mindset and then not realize that our adrenals have a huge role in this too. And I'll give you an example as to why I say this. I've done a lot of work. My journey has been renewing my thoughts and my words and my responses, right? That's the whole reason that I started the Renewed Mama podcast. But low adrenals and thyroids run in my family. So ever since I was married, I've been supporting those and trying to keep them strong and healthy, right? And working on healing the gut and all of those things. But about a year ago, I was noticing how I was getting super irritated with the kids, just quick at being critical or negative all over again. I was like, whoa, what's going on here? I've worked so hard to root that out of my life. And why am I falling back into these old habits, right? Why am I letting myself get overwhelmed quickly and feeling so tired? And then I heard you on another podcast, and you were talking about not having positive thoughts going through this journey. And then you talked about being sensitive to light. And we have big, beautiful windows in our kitchen and our dining room and our living room. But I would put on sunglasses to do homeschool with the kids because the light was just so bright. And then I thought, oh no, I have gotten out of supporting my adrenals. Hearing you on the podcast made me realize, oh no, I'm letting my adrenals go.
Yeah, so I think that's really important that you talked about that, because yes, our mindset is so important, but at the same time, like if you are stuck in these patterns, then it's not like that's where you need to dig deeper. There's something physical possibly going on. And I love that you pointed that out. And it really is a catch-22, because like your mindset influences adrenal function, but adrenal function influences your mindset.
Right.
So it's really important. And so, yes, there are things you can do lifestyle and nutrition wise, really, stress management. And as moms, sometimes that's not always the easiest thing, but trying to get yourself in that parasympathetic rest and digest state as much as you can, and especially while you're eating. So I think that's something that's very hard. Like I would just eat in the car and I would multitask, or I would read while I was eating, or I would stand while I was eating. And all those things are stressors, stressful to the digestion and also to the adrenals. So that's something that you could pay attention to, really making sure that you're well hydrated. And a really simple hack is you could put like a pinch of sea salt in your water to help with that intracellular hydration. Your adrenals burn up minerals. They really like minerals. So having the electrolytes is really good. Just wrote a blog on that. Making sure your digestion, blood sugar are on point, making sure that you're going to the bathroom every day. So if you're not having a bowel movement every day, you're setting yourself up for dysfunction on so many levels. And so that's a really simple thing that, as moms, we can do. If that's not happening, go get some psyllium husk. It's really inexpensive, and get yourself moving every day, going to the bathroom. Trying to get good sleep. I know that's hard when you have littles, but like that adage, when baby sleeps, mom sleeps, try to do that as much as you can, or get yourself community or support so you can take a nap and not really using that time to get things done, because there will be a time when your kids are older and things will get done and they'll actually help you.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. Like it's just a season.
Right.
And then like, as far as broad spectrum vitamins that you can get into your body, looking at quality B vitamins, vitamin C, the adrenal glands love vitamin C, vitamins D and E and K, a good omega-3. I like, just for over the counter, you could get a Nordic Naturals is a decent brand. And then practicing, like instituting restorative practices. So like breath work, meditation, vagal massage. So you have your vagal nerve that goes from your brain to your stomach that really communicates with your digestive tract. So you could do a little bit of vagal massage here behind your ears, Epsom salt baths, grounding. So just going outside. This is great with kids, and getting your feet in the grass. It's really healing. And then, managing your emotions, having an emotional awareness. So like, I'm struggling right now. Is this a physical need or is this emotional need? Can I change my perspective in some way? Those are all important. Now, you can get into supplementation, which I think, diet and lifestyle, to me, that's the foundation of foundations. Really, you should get those on point for sure. But if you get to a certain point, it's hard to, like, for some people, depending on your genetic makeup and your environment that you're in, because like not all of us can get out of maybe like a stressful environment, so if you know you're going to be in stress all the time, that sort of a thing, then, or if you're in extreme dysfunction, then you would certainly want to test and be targeted on how you're taking care of yourself and addressing your adrenals. Because like if you just supplement on your own, if you tend towards high cortisol and you have more of a stimulant formula, you can be pushing yourself into further dysfunction. And if you have low cortisol and you have like this calming formula, you're pushing further dysfunction. So you have to be really careful when you're supplementing. But some things that I do like, if you're kind of in that, if you resonated with that wired category, you would be looking at like vitamin C, ashwagandha, getting good potassium, passion flower and chamomile tea. Those are all really great broad spectrum support. If you're in that wired and tired category, rhodiola is a great herb that you could add in. Maca, some support for mitochondria could be good. And then supporting your sleep. So things like L-theanine for sleep, or lavender tea for sleep at night. Those would be great things to reach for. And then if you're in that like totally depleted, just tired category, again, the rhodiola, ginseng would be helpful, cordyceps, B vitamins. And then in my practice, I'll use glandulars at that point to really help stimulate function. A word on glandulars is that you just want to be careful with them because they should be monitored. You don't want to do that more than 3 to 6 months without some sort of monitoring.
I'm not sure I know what glandulars are.
Okay, so we used to eat organ meats, right?
Oh, okay. You mean like
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is
okay.
just organ meats in a capsule form, right? And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
they're full of like nourishing nutrients that the body needs. So you can use
Right.
an adrenal glandular, which would be adrenal organs that are freeze-dried and concentrated. But what you could do instead of taking like an adrenal glandular, if you don't know where you are, is you could start to incorporate organ meats into your diet. But, as Americans, Canadians, just modern era, we don't have a taste for that. So you can
Right.
start to add them to your food with seasonings like I love pluck, which is a freeze-dried organ seasoning that you can put in your food and just kind of give yourself that broad spectrum support and nourishment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a wealth of ideas there. You help women with so many things, not just adrenal support, but hormonal dysregulation, thyroid support, chronic fatigue, liver support, leaky gut, and blood sugar imbalances. What a wonderful help you are.
Yeah, kind of a jack of all trades.
Yes, yes. Well, as you so clearly explained, they all fit together, they all work together, right? Or perhaps dysfunction together.
Yeah, and I think this is something really important that I learned in my nutritional program is that, we have specialists, right, in modern medicine. And while that is important, I'm not saying it isn't, we've kind of put on the back burner the fact that all these systems work together, right? And you are a holistic being. And so digestion is not in isolation from adrenals, and adrenals are not in isolation from thyroid and liver. Like they all just function and work together. And so one is out of balance, then all the other systems are also susceptible. So when a person comes to me, they're usually not struggling with one thing. They're struggling with multiple things. And although I'm working on adrenals, because that's, mostly my target market for now, I'm always going back to basics. So looking at digestion, looking at blood sugar, looking at inflammation and fatty acid balance, looking at mineral status and hydration status.
Right.
And then, we'll progress from there depending on what is going on with the person.
Right, right. Tell us where we can find you, where we can follow you and reach out for support.
Sure. So my website is forestcreekwellness.com, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Forest Creek Wellness. And then I work with clients one-on-one and in group situations. not sure when you're airing this podcast, but I'm kind of putting one-on-one work on hold for a couple of months. I'm going to be working specifically on an adrenal group program for the summer. And I just love working with people in groups because there's accountability and you help each other and you feed off of each other. And so I'm going to play around with that and putting lab testing and the group all together in one nice, neat little package. So if you want to hop in on that, make sure and get on my mailing list or follow me on Instagram. I do a weekly newsletter, so sometimes twice a week, depending on how much time I have on my hands, but it's always like recipes or inspirational stuff or mindset stuff.
That's fantastic. I'm going to join your newsletter.
Great.
I'll leave all the links in the show notes for
Okay,
Kristen.
perfect.
Yes. Before we say goodbye, what is one thing that you wish all moms could know? Could be about anything.
Motherhood doesn't have to be hard and exhausting, right? And society has told us that it is. And it's almost like this martyrdom or this suffering. And one of the things that I learned again in my nutritional program is our hormones are the lens through which we see the world. And so is motherhood stressful, or are we in such a place of physical stress that it's perceived as stressful? And so maybe it's not always our lack of community. I mean, I think those things do matter, don't get me wrong, but maybe that's not it. Maybe it's that we don't have the resiliency that we need to be the mothers that we can be. And so I feel like because of my situation, I was very much robbed of my kids' younger years, which is very sad, but I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And so I can redeem it here in this teenage years. But if you are exhausted or depressed, or your kids irritate you all the time, or you just, you're like me, and you go to the grocery store and you have to take a nap, like it's just so overwhelming, then I would recommend reaching out and getting help. Because there are most likely things going on that are putting you in that place. Right. And you can even be in a place where you're in great health and then it regresses. So like I actually had that situation recently. My kids, 3 of them were in a very serious car accident last April. I gained a lot of weight and I could not bounce back, right? And so we got through, or mostly got through our recovery, and I still was not doing well and bouncing back the way that I should. And I do myself like I do my clients and did all my tests again. And sure enough, I have no cortisol. I have no neurotransmitters, like they're all tanked, and I need to take care of my own self. So when we think of self-care, it's not always taking the bath or, getting the pedicure or the spa treatment. It's actually nourishing your body and figuring out what is going on and finding a practitioner that can help you.
Right. Yes. And we are worth taking care of.
Yeah, I think motherhood is one of the most important jobs in the world, right? So we need to feel good to be able to do it.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kristen. That was just what we needed to hear. I'm so grateful for everything that you've shared. Thank you for explaining it so well.
I'm so glad we connected. I just love the work that you're doing.
Yes, thank you.
Wow, wasn't that fantastic? I learned so much. Tell us in the comments what you learned from this conversation. Kristen and I would love to hear from you. If you want help supporting your adrenals, take Kristen's adrenal fatigue quiz found on her website, forestcreekwellness.com. You can also learn more about her private support and group support on her website. If this episode helped you, share this with another mama you know. Stay tuned for more conversations about renewing your health and your home. Remember, mama, that if you are wishing for a coach, an accountability partner, another mama to talk to help you to renew your thoughts, your words, and your responses, I'm all yours. I know what it's like to be stuck in my thoughts and my words and responses. I loved being a mother, but I didn't like the mama I was, the wife I was, how I was responding, so short-tempered and easily frustrated and annoyed and critical. But I didn't know how to change, how to do better, how to be more patient and not take my frustration out on my kids and my husband until I got coached. and I'm here to help you get coached. Go to renewedmamacoaching.com and book your first coaching session with me. If any of my available half-hour chat times don't work for you, tell me what times do work, and I'll make it happen in my schedule. Your parenting, the peace in your home, better relationships with your children, less outbursts and temper tantrums, and a strong, positive mom mindset can be yours. Go now to renewedmamacoaching.com and book your first coaching session with me. If the Renewed Mama podcast encourages you, would you leave a review on Apple Podcasts and YouTube? Your review helps the podcast to grow so that more mamas find it and can stay renewed too. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for listening to the Renewed Mama podcast. I appreciate you. I care about you. For more resources, visit the Renewed Mama podcast, Renewed Mama Coaching, Speak Life Badges, and Austin's Kids Club.